The sharp metallic clang of tools cut through the air in Joe's garage when the first clap of thunder rattled the sky on that dreary, gray afternoon. Lily and Daisy, identical twins right down to the last wisp of brown hair woven into slightly frazzled pigtails, immediately stopped their work. Their wide green eyes, a legacy from the mother they'd never known, shot nervously toward the grease-smudged window. At only 7 years old, the twins held a secret dread that a heavy downpour meant fewer customers at the garage, which in turn meant another night facing a nearly empty refrigerator. Joe watched his daughters from the corner of his eye, feigning focus on the open engine block in front of him. His heart clenched every time he saw them trade that worried glance, a look that seemed far too old for their small faces. From a young age, the girls seemed to bear the weight of the world on their tiny shoulders, as if trying to compensate for their mother's absence by being doubly strong, doubly responsible. "Lily, Daisy, come here," Joe called out, wiping his grease-caked hands on a rag that was worn nearly transparent. The girls scampered over to him, their scuffed-up work boots thumping against the concrete floor of Joe's garage. "Today I'm going to teach you something important." The twins glanced at each other with that signature sparkle in their eyes, the same one that appeared whenever their father promised to teach them a new mechanical skill. Ever since they could walk, the garage had been their personal playground. While other children played with dolls, Lily and Daisy preferred to identify tools, memorizing their names and functions like they were lines of a favorite poem. "Take a look," Joe said, pointing to a tire propped against the wall. "Today, we're going to learn to do something everyone should know, but hardly anyone does properly. Change a tire." The girls approached the tire with the same reverence other kids might reserve for a Christmas gift. Joe couldn't suppress a smile. In these moments, he saw Grace, his late wife, reflected in his daughters, the same unquenchable curiosity, the same quiet resolve. The rain was now drumming against the roof, but inside the garage, the world had shrunk to this single lesson. Joe explained each step with methodical care, amazed at how intently his daughters hung on every detail. Daisy, ever the more analytical of the two, asked precise questions about ideal tire pressure and the proper torque for the lug nuts. Lily, the intuitive one, already had her sleeves pushed up, anxious to get her hands dirty. "Dad," Lily interrupted, just as he was explaining the hydraulic jack. "Why are your hands shaking?" Joe hadn't realized, but his hands were indeed trembling. The sheer exhaustion of working 15-hour days was beginning to show. He tried to brush it off, but Daisy was already at his side, her green eyes filled with concern. "You need to rest, Dad," said Daisy, her small voice carrying a surprising weight of authority. "We can finish tomorrow." No, Joe insisted. "You two need to learn this. You never know when—" His voice trailed off for a second. Ever since losing Grace in childbirth, his greatest fear was that something would happen to him, leaving the girls utterly alone in the world. That was why he pushed so hard to teach them everything he knew, turning every moment into a lesson in survival. "Then let us try," Lily proposed, already wrestling with the lug wrench, which was nearly as big as she was. "You just have to say if we're doing it right." Joe hesitated, but something in his daughter's determined expressions convinced him. He sank onto a nearby stool and began to guide them. To his astonishment, they worked in perfect unison, as if they could read each other's minds. Where Joe's calloused hands sometimes fumbled in tight spaces, the twins' small, nimble fingers moved with impressive dexterity. "Extraordinary," Joe murmured, watching Daisy hold the lug wrench at the exact right angle, while Lily applied all the force her skinny little arms could muster. The two exchanged occasional glances, a silent twin code that let them anticipate each other's moves with seamless coordination. In under 20 minutes, the tire was changed perfectly. The girls stepped back, cheeks flushed with exertion and pride, awaiting their father's approval. Joe walked over to inspect their work, his heart swelling with a mix of admiration and melancholy. Grace would be so proud, he said, more to himself than to his daughters. They moved in and hugged him, their small, grease-smeared hands leaving dark prints on his already stained shirt, prints he never wanted to wash away. Another clap of thunder echoed through the sky, making the girls jump, but this time it wasn't out of fear. Now their eyes shone with a newfound confidence. They had mastered another skill, another tool in their arsenal for survival. "Tomorrow," Lily said, her voice full of enthusiasm, "can we learn how to fix brakes?" "No, the engine," Daisy corrected. "Brakes are too easy." Joe laughed, suddenly feeling the weight on his shoulders lift. His daughters were true gifts, tiny warriors who saw every challenge as an adventure, every hardship as a chance to learn. None of them could have guessed on that rainy afternoon that the simple lesson of changing a tire was merely the first step on a journey beyond their wildest dreams. Soon, fate would test not only their mechanical abilities, but also their capacity to trust strangers and believe in miracles. For now, they were just a father and his two daughters in a modest garage, surrounded by the sound of rain and the smell of motor oil, sharing something far more profound than a mechanic's lesson. Sharing a bond no tool could tighten, no manual could explain. Evening was descending when Joe finally locked up Joe's garage. The girls helped him put the tools away, each one in its designated spot, a ritual they had established themselves to keep the workspace organized. As they walked to the little blue house out back, Lily and Daisy chattered excitedly about everything they had learned, already making plans for their next lessons. Joe watched them, amazed by their boundless energy. Even after a full day helping in the garage, that spark of curiosity still danced in their eyes, that insatiable thirst for knowledge. He knew he should encourage them to play more, to have a normal childhood like other kids, but he also knew his daughters were different. They were born with grease in their veins and determination in their hearts. That night, after a simple dinner, Joe found the twins asleep on the worn-out couch in the living room, an old mechanic's manual open between them. Their small hands, still showing faint traces of grease under the nails, were clasped together, even in sleep. He gently covered them with a thin blanket, kissed their foreheads, and for the first time in a long while felt that maybe, just maybe, he was doing something right amidst all the difficulties. Little did he know that those tiny hands, which had learned to change a tire that day, would soon touch not only engines and tools, but also the heart of someone who would forever alter the destiny of their small family. The late afternoon sun was beginning to dip below the horizon as Lily and Daisy trudged home from Maplewood Elementary, their steps a bit heavier than usual. The day had been long, and they knew a few hours of helping their father at Joe's garage still awaited them. Even so, they walked hand in hand, sharing a small bag of cookies their teacher had given them at the end of class. "Save a piece for Dad," Daisy reminded, always the more considerate of the two. Lily nodded, carefully rewrapping the last cookie in its crumpled napkin. The walk home was tougher than the walk to school. Besides being tired, it involved a long, steady incline up Dusty Creek Road that seemed to get steeper with every step of their small legs. That's when they saw it. A car pulled over on the shoulder, a vehicle so sleek and elegant it looked like it belonged on another planet, not this simple country road. "Look over there, Daisy," Lily pointed at the car. A tall man with touches of gray at his temples was pacing around the vehicle, a phone in his hand, and a worried expression on his face. Daisy squeezed her sister's hand. "We need to get home. Dad must be waiting." "But he looks like he needs help," Lily insisted, "and Dad always says we should help anyone who's in trouble." They exchanged a look for a moment, one of those silent conversations only twins can have. Without another word, they changed course and walked toward the car. "Good afternoon, sir," Daisy called out politely. "Do you need help?" The man turned, clearly startled to see two small girls addressing him. His deep blue eyes widened just a fraction. "Oh, good afternoon," he replied, lowering his phone. "Actually, I do have a problem. I got a flat tire and can't get a signal on my phone to call for help." "We can help," Lily offered cheerfully. "We know how to change a tire." The man looked incredulously at the two girls in their worn school backpacks and uniforms that were a bit faded from countless washes. You two? He hesitated, a gentle smile forming on his lips. But you're so young. Don't worry, I'll figure something out. Do you have a spare tire and a jack in the car? Daisy asked, already surveying the vehicle with a practiced eye that seemed uncanny for a child. Well, yes, he answered, still hesitant. Then we can help, Lily insisted, already shrugging off her backpack. Our dad is a mechanic and taught us all about cars. We changed tires almost every day at the shop. The man, whom they would later learn was named Rick Harrison, watched in utter amazement as the girls took command of the situation with startling efficiency. Lily began to loosen the lug nuts while Daisy positioned the jack correctly. Careful with the jack position on this model, Daisy cautioned. You have to place it exactly on the support point, or you might damage the body. Rick looked on, dumbfounded, as those small hands worked with a professional's precision. The girls moved in perfect harmony, as if performing a well-rehearsed dance, where one finished a movement, the other began the next, without a single word needed between them. "This is incredible," he exclaimed, his voice filled with genuine wonder. "How did you learn to do this so well?" The girls shared a quick glance before Daisy answered, "Our dad has been teaching us since we were little. After she passed away the day we were born, we had to learn quickly to help him in the shop." Rick felt a pang in his chest. The weariness on their young faces, the patched uniforms, the maturity in their eyes. It all told a story of struggle and resilience that moved him deeply. "You must be very proud of your dad," he said softly. "We are," Lily replied, tightening the last lug nut. "He works so hard to take care of us. That's why we work hard to help him too." "All set," Daisy announced, placing the tools back in the trunk. "Everything's done correctly." Rick approached to inspect the work, genuinely impressed by its perfection. The tire was perfectly aligned, the lug nuts tightened to exactly the right degree. "You are truly extraordinary," he exclaimed, his voice filled with sincere admiration. "I don't know how to thank you. I've been here for almost an hour trying to get help." "You don't have to thank us, sir," Lily said, already shouldering her backpack again. "Anyone would do the same." Rick shook his head, smiling. "No, not everyone would stop to help, much less do such a perfect job. You have a special gift." The girls blushed at the praise but began to say their goodbyes. The sun was dipping fast, and they still had a long walk ahead. "Wait," Rick called out, an idea forming in his mind as he saw the exhaustion in the twins' faces. Would you like a ride home? It's the least I can do to repay you." Rick stood there, watching the two small figures look at each other, weighing his offer. The fatigue in their eyes and the weight of their backpacks made the decision tempting. The next chapter of their lives was about to begin, though none of them could possibly imagine the extraordinary changes that simple ride would bring. Rick Harrison's luxury sedan glided smoothly down Dusty Creek Road, kicking up a fine veil of dust in the fading light. In the back seat, Lily and Daisy sat in silence, still a little wary of accepting a ride from a stranger, even one who seemed so kind. "It's around that curve," Daisy indicated, pointing to a small garage with a faded sign that read, "Joe's Garage." "We live out back." As the car pulled to a stop in front of the little blue house, something felt instantly wrong. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the evening breeze. The girls looked at each other. Their father would never leave the door like that. "Something's wrong," Lily murmured, her small heart beginning to pound. "Dad always locks the door." Before Rick could say a word, the twins were out of the car, sprinting toward the house. The sound of their frantic footsteps echoed in the unnerving silence of the late afternoon. "Dad?" Daisy called out, her voice trembling. "Dad, where are you?" The silence that answered was heavy and absolute. Lily was the first to see him. A piercing scream ripped through the air when she found Joe collapsed on the kitchen floor, a small trickle of blood running from his forehead. A wrench lay beside him, and grease smears on the linoleum suggested he had likely come straight from the garage. "Dad!" they both cried in unison, rushing to his side. Rick, who had followed the girls inside, immediately took charge. With practiced movements, he checked Joe's vital signs while simultaneously pulling out his phone. "He's breathing," he told the girls, who stared with wide, terrified eyes. "We need to get him to the hospital right now." Within minutes, Rick had carried Joe to his car, amazed at the strength he found in himself during the emergency. The twins worked in perfect coordination, one grabbing their father's wallet and ID, the other locking up the house. In the car, Joe was settled into the reclining front seat, while the girls huddled together in the back. The initial shock gave way to Daisy's muffled sobs as Lily kept her eyes glued to their unconscious father. "He'll be all right," Rick tried to reassure them, his foot pressing harder on the accelerator. "County General Hospital isn't far." Daisy began whispering prayers she had learned from her teacher at Maplewood Elementary, her small hands clutching her sister's so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Mrs. Davis always says that God hears children's prayers more," she murmured through her tears. Lily, trying to choke back her own sobs, began to talk, as if recounting their memories could somehow keep their father tethered to them. "You know, Mr. Rick," her voice was shaky, "our dad is the strongest person we know. He wakes up every day at 4 a.m. to get the shop ready, and he never complains. Even when he's really tired, he always has a smile for us," Daisy added, still praying. Rick watched their faces in the rearview mirror, so young and already shouldering so much. The maturity in their eyes was a painful contrast to their childish features. "Sometimes," Lily continued, tears now streaming freely down her face, "we skip dinner because we need to save money. Some customers can't pay right away, you know. But Dad always keeps some food for us, even if he goes without." "He says children can't go to bed hungry," Daisy whispered, almost inaudibly. A faint groan from Joe made them all jump. Lily leaned forward, gripping the back of the seat. "Please, Mr. Rick," she pleaded, her green eyes shimmering with tears. "Don't let our dad die. He's all we have in the world." "He's the only one left for us," Daisy added, tears now rolling freely down her face. "We promise we'll work even harder, be even stronger. But please." Rick felt a knot tighten in his chest, a feeling unlike any he'd had in years. In all his life as a successful businessman, accustomed to dealing with numbers and negotiations, he had never encountered an emotion so raw, so pure. He gripped the steering wheel, pushing the car faster. Plans were already forming in his mind, ways to help this family that fate had so strangely dropped into his life. It wasn't just about money. It was something deeper, a connection he felt with these two small, resilient souls. When they finally screeched to a halt at the hospital, everything happened in a blur. Joe was rushed into the emergency room, while Rick handled the admission paperwork. The twins refused to release their hold on each other's hands, their small bodies trembling with fear and exhaustion. "Come," Rick said after a while, guiding them to the waiting area. "We have to be strong now, and wait." The girls settled onto the hard plastic chairs, still holding hands. Daisy continued her whispered prayers, while Lily fixed her gaze on the double doors through which their father had vanished. Rick watched them, a decision solidifying in his mind. These children had shown him something that years of wealth and success had stripped away, a true sense of strength, love, and dignity. There in that cold hospital waiting room, he made a silent vow. He would do everything in his power to help this family. What he didn't yet know was that destiny had far grander plans for them all, and that this crisis was just the beginning of an extraordinary transformation in their lives. The unsteady flicker of a fluorescent bulb cast anxious shadows over Joe's pale face in the emergency room bed. Lily and Daisy sat on either side of their father, their small hands gripping his, while Rick Harrison conferred with the doctor in the hallway. "It was an accident with a hydraulic lift," the doctor explained, reviewing his notes. "The equipment gave way while he was underneath a car. Fortunately, the cut on his head appears to be the most serious injury. He's very lucky. It could have been much worse." Rick felt a cold chill run down his spine, imagining what much worse might have been. Through the partially open door, he could see the twins, still exhausted, but standing guard like little sentinels, watching over their father's sleep. "How long will he need to stay in the hospital?" Rick asked. "At least a week," the doctor replied. "We need to monitor him for any sign of a concussion and ensure there are no complications." Rick thanked him and re-entered the room. Daisy had finally drifted off to sleep, her head resting on the edge of the bed, while Lily fought to keep her eyes open. "Lily," he said gently, "I need to go to Joe's garage to get your dad's documents for the hospital. Can you tell me where they are?" The girl hesitated, her gaze shifting to her unconscious father. In the second drawer of the desk, she finally answered, her voice wavering. But what?" Rick prompted. "Will you promise you'll come back?" she asked, her green eyes shining with unshed tears. "Everyone always ends up leaving." Rick felt his heart constrict. He crouched down to meet her gaze. "I promise, Lily, I won't abandon you." The drive back to the garage was quiet, Rick's mind replaying the day's surreal events. How strange fate was. This morning he was just a billionaire conducting a personal social experiment in disguise, and now he was deeply entangled in the life of this small family. Arriving at Joe's garage, the first thing he noticed was the hydraulic lift. Even in the dim light, he could see how dangerously old the equipment was. The safety lock was practically eaten through with rust, an accident that had been waiting to happen. With slow steps, Rick walked through the garage. Every corner told a story of hard work and dignity. The tools, though old, were meticulously organized, undoubtedly the handiwork of the twins. On the wall, a corkboard held a mix of childish crayon drawings, service receipts, and technical notes. On the worn-out desk, alongside the documents he was looking for, Rick found a ledger. Joe's careful, neat entries revealed the daily struggle to keep the business afloat while raising his daughters. Several customers owed small amounts, but Joe had never refused service to anyone, even knowing some might take months to pay. That was when Rick's eyes landed on something that made his heart stop. On a loose sheet of paper, written in a child's handwriting, was a list. Things we want to give Dad. The items were heartbreakingly simple. A new lift. The old one makes scary noises. Tools that don't hurt his hands. A comfy chair so he can rest. Hot coffee every day. A new work coat. His is all patched up. Rick sank into Joe's worn chair, the paper trembling in his hands. The simplicity of the girls' wishes, their profound concern for their father, the quiet dignity with which this family faced their struggles, it all hit him like a physical blow. He stood up with a newfound determination and began a mental inventory of everything that needed to be replaced. The hydraulic lift was just the start. The old tools, the noisy air compressor, the inadequate lighting, all of it posed not just a safety risk, but an unnecessary hardship on Joe's honest work. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. First to his personal assistant, instructing him to research the best suppliers of auto repair equipment. Then to a trusted architect, requesting an urgent renovation plan. As he locked up Joe's garage, Rick already had a detailed plan forming in his mind. This wouldn't be just a renovation. It would be a complete transformation. Joe and his daughters deserved a safe, dignified place to work. Back at County General Hospital, he found the twins finally asleep, curled together on the uncomfortable waiting room chairs. He carefully draped his own jacket over them. "Don't worry, little ones," he whispered, more to himself than to them. "You're not alone anymore." Joe stirred in the bed, his eyes fluttering open slightly. "My daughters?" he mumbled, still disoriented. "They're right here, sleeping," Rick reassured him. "They're extraordinary girls, Joe. You did an amazing job raising them by yourself. But sometimes—" Joe struggled to find the words. "Sometimes I'm afraid I'm not enough for them." "You're more than enough," Rick replied firmly. "And now you have someone to help you. Rest, my friend. When you get better, we'll have a lot of work to do." Joe drifted back to sleep, oblivious to the fact that his life was about to be irrevocably changed. Outside the room, the sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. It was a new day, a new beginning for them all. Rick watched the dawn, his heart feeling lighter than it had in a long time. In his hands, the girls' wish list had become a mission. He would give them far more than a new lift or better tools. He would give them a chance at a brighter future, one where their father's hard work would be rewarded with the dignity he so richly deserved. Destiny had handed him an opportunity to make a real difference, not with grand gestures or empty charity, but with something far more meaningful, helping a family that, without even knowing it, had taught him so much about love, dignity, and courage. The twins' days fell into a new, unfamiliar rhythm after their father's accident. Every morning, Mrs. Johnson, the kindly neighbor, would wake them with hot chocolate and fresh bread for strength, she'd say gently, rebraiding the girls' hair with her caring hands. Mr. Miller, who owned Miller's Grocery down the corner, always set aside the freshest fruit for them. Kids need vitamins to grow, he'd insist, refusing any money Rick tried to give him. It was on a particularly cold Wednesday that Sarah Thompson, the social worker, arrived unannounced. Lily and Daisy were returning from their daily visit to their father at the hospital, accompanied by Rick, when they saw the official county car parked in front of the little blue house. "Good morning," Sarah introduced herself, a notepad already in her hand. "I'm with Social Services. We need to evaluate the children's situation." The twins' hearts plunged. They'd heard stories about children being taken from their families in situations like this. Daisy gripped Lily's hand tightly, while Rick stepped forward protectively. "Please, come in," he said calmly. "We can talk in the living room." The house, though simple, was impeccably clean. On the kitchen table sat a note from Mrs. Johnson mentioning a pot of soup she'd left on the stove. Neatly stacked school books on the coffee table showed the girls were keeping up with their studies. Sarah Thompson took it all in with a sharp eye, making quiet notes. "How have the children's days been since the accident?" she asked, her tone professional but not unkind. Before Rick could reply, Mrs. Davis, the retired teacher who lived in the grand Victorian house across the street, arrived with the twins' homework. "Oh, sorry to interrupt," she said, seeing the meeting. "I just came to drop off their lessons and ask if they need help with math today." Sarah Thompson's eyebrows rose with intrigue. "You help them with their lessons?" "Oh, yes," Mrs. Davis replied with a warm smile. "Everyone in the neighborhood takes turns helping out. They're such dedicated girls, you know. They never miss school, always finish their homework." As if on cue, Mr. Miller appeared at the door holding a basket of fresh vegetables. "Brought tonight's dinner," he announced, only to pause awkwardly when he noticed the official visitor. Sarah watched the scene unfold with growing fascination. In all her years on the job, she had rarely witnessed a community rally so completely around a family in need. "What about medical expenses?" she asked Rick. "Public insurance doesn't always cover everything." Rick straightened up in his chair. It was time to be forthright. "I'm a businessman," he explained. "I met the girls by chance when they helped me change a tire. Since then, I've taken it upon myself to help this family. All medical expenses are covered, and I've already started a renovation project for the shop to make it safer when Joe returns." Sarah frowned slightly. That's a big commitment for someone who just met them. It was Lily who answered, her small voice steady. "Mr. Rick is different. He doesn't help us out of pity. He understands us. And he keeps his promises, just like our dad," Daisy added. The social worker looked at the girls for a long moment. She saw not just trust in Rick, but a startling maturity in them as well. "Well," she said finally, "I still need to do some formal checks, but—" She was interrupted by the arrival of more neighbors. Mrs. Silva brought freshly laundered and ironed school uniforms. Kevin, who worked part-time at the garage, reported that he had organized the tools and handled a few regular customers who needed minor services. Sarah Thompson closed her notepad, a small smile forming on her lips. "You know," she said, "in 15 years of social work, I've learned that sometimes the best family isn't just about blood ties, but the one formed in times of need." Rick saw the twins relax beside him. Lily, always the more expressive one, couldn't hold back tears of relief. "I'll still make regular visits," Sarah continued, her voice softer now, "but I can see the girls are well supported. This community you've built here, well, it's something special." As soon as Sarah left, the house filled up again with neighbors bringing food, school supplies, or just a comforting presence. The twins bounced from person to person, thanking everyone with hugs and bright smiles. Rick watched it all, his heart full. His world of high-stakes business and sterile luxury seemed so distant and hollow compared to the wealth of affection he was witnessing here. Each person who walked through that door brought not just material aid, but love and hope. That night, after everyone had gone and the girls were finally asleep, Rick sat on the porch of the little blue house. The cool night air carried the scent of jasmine from Mrs. Johnson's garden. Somewhere nearby, Mr. Miller's gentle guitar notes drifted through the air. He often played at night. His phone buzzed with work messages, important meetings, decisions that needed to be made. But for the first time in his life, business could wait. Here, on this simple street among people with open hearts, he had found something far more valuable than all his investments. The next morning, when they went to visit Joe in the hospital, the girls excitedly recounted the social worker's visit and how the whole neighborhood had shown up to help. "See, Dad," Daisy said, holding Joe's hand, "we're not alone. We never were." "No," Lily added, looking gratefully at Rick. Joe, still weak but more alert, smiled. "Thank you," he said to Rick, his voice breaking, "for taking care of my girls." "No," Rick replied softly. "Thank you for letting me be part of this family." Outside the room, Sarah Thompson, who had come for a follow-up visit, watched through the slightly ajar door. In her report that day, she wrote something she rarely had the chance to document. "Family is in an ideal care and community support situation. Recommendation: maintain current environment with regular follow-up for any additional support if needed." In her folder, alongside the official documents, she tucked a drawing Lily had given her, a picture of a family far larger than the traditional concept, including all the neighbors, Rick, and even Sarah herself. Across the top, in Lily's neat handwriting, were the words, "Our family of the heart." It was barely dawn when the rumble of the first delivery truck broke the morning quiet in front of Joe's garage. Lily and Daisy, who had been awake for hours with sheer excitement, rushed to the window when they heard the noise. Their eyes sparkled as they watched workers begin to unload brand-new, still-packaged equipment. "Look, Daisy!" Lily exclaimed, pointing to a massive crate. Could that be the new lift? Rick, arriving just then, couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm. "Actually," he said, "before we install anything, we need our specialist's opinion. Which colors do you think we should use on the walls?" The twins exchanged a glance, surprised and thrilled by the responsibility. Daisy, ever the practical one, began poring over the color swatches Rick had brought, while Lily imagined a bright, cheerful garage like the ones she'd seen in magazines. "Light blue," Daisy suggested after a few minutes of deep thought. "It's a bright color that helps with lighting and won't show dirt too easily." "And yellow," Lily chimed in. "Like the sun, it'll make everyone happy when they come in." Frank, an employee who had worked with Joe for years, showed up at that moment, his eyes widening at the scene. "My goodness," he murmured, looking at all the boxes of equipment. "Is this all for here?" "Yes, Frank," Rick replied, "and I'll need your help. You know this garage better than anyone." The man's face lit up with a sense of purpose. In the days since Joe's accident, he'd felt adrift, worried about the future of the place he considered a second home. The renovation began with a burst of energy. While the professionals hired by Rick handled the structural work, the community pitched in surprising ways. Mr. Miller from the grocery store organized meal deliveries for the workers. Mrs. Davis brought over old curtains to shield the new equipment from dust. Even Kevin, who was learning mechanics from Joe, came by every day after school to help out. The twins were the heart and soul of the operation. They supervised every detail with an adorable seriousness, frequently consulting a small notebook where they jotted down the important things Dad always says. When the painters arrived, the girls had already mapped out exactly which color went on which wall. "The light blue goes here," Daisy explained, pointing to the main work area, "because that's where the cars will be, and we need good lighting." "And the yellow in the waiting area," Lily added, "to cheer up the customers while they wait." Frank spent hours learning to operate the new equipment, amazed by the modern technology. "Joe's going to be speechless," he kept repeating, testing the new hydraulic lift with a sense of reverence. As the days passed, the transformation was astounding. The grease-stained walls gave way to bright, welcoming colors. The cracked concrete floor was replaced with a professional-grade, non-slip surface. The rickety old lighting was upgraded to a modern LED system. But it wasn't just the physical changes that were impressive. It was the spirit of community that grew stronger each day. Neighbors who had barely spoken before were now working side by side, sharing stories during coffee breaks. Laughter echoed where once only the clang of tools had been heard. One afternoon, while organizing the new tool chests, Daisy found an old photograph tucked behind a cabinet. It showed a much younger Joe on the day he opened the garage, his smile radiant and full of dreams. "Dad's going to smile like that again," Lily said, looking over her sister's shoulder at the photo. Rick, passing by, stopped to look at the picture. "He will," he confirmed, and this time with even more reasons. The twins had devised their own system for organizing the new tools, using color-coded labels they made themselves. "This way, nobody loses anything," Daisy explained proudly, demonstrating how each tool had its designated home. At the end of each day, Rick would take the girls to visit Joe at the hospital, where they would give him enthusiastic, detailed reports on the renovation's progress. Their father's eyes would shine as he listened, especially when they talked about how they were overseeing everything. "You're doing exactly what I do," he told them one night, his voice thick with emotion. On the eve of installing the final piece of equipment, the community organized a small celebration in the remodeled garage. Every neighbor brought something to share: food, drinks, music. The twins darted around, proudly showing off every new detail. Frank, who had spent the day finalizing the tool organization, looked around with misty eyes. "You know," he said to Rick, "I've worked in mechanics for 30 years, but I've never seen a garage like this. It's not just that it's pretty, it's like it has a soul." Rick surveyed the scene with a full heart. The brightly painted walls chosen by the girls, the modern and safe equipment, the impeccable organization. It all reflected not just a financial investment, but an investment in people, in dreams, and in community. That night, after everyone had gone, Lily and Daisy sat in the new waiting area, their little legs dangling from the comfortable chairs. "Do you think Dad will like it?" Daisy asked, a rare note of uncertainty in her usually confident voice. "He's going to love it," Rick answered from the doorway. "You know why? Because every inch of this place is filled with your love." The girls smiled, their eyes bright with pride and anticipation. The garage was no longer just a place of work. It had become a symbol of hope, of new beginnings, and of renewed dreams. And very soon their father would be home to see it all. "No, that's not the right way," Lily said, shaking her head, her pigtails swinging. "You have to hold the torque wrench at a right angle, or you'll get the wrong measurement." The installation technician, a middle-aged man with 20 years of experience, looked down in surprise at the small figure beside him. Daisy, who was watching intently, added to the explanation. "Dad always says you have to make a perfect L with your arm." Look, she demonstrated the motion with a ruler, her small arm forming the precise angle she described. Rick, observing from across the garage, couldn't hide a smile. It wasn't the first time that week he had seen the twins correct seasoned professionals, always with a unique combination of technical know-how and childlike kindness. The garage was almost unrecognizable. The new equipment gleamed under the modern lights, and the freshly painted walls gave the space an air of crisp efficiency. Most impressive, however, was how Lily and Daisy moved through the space, masters of their new domain, knowing every inch, every tool, every procedure. "Come here, Frank," Daisy called, noticing the longtime employee struggling with the new diagnostic computer. "We found an easier way to use it. It's kind of like a video game." Frank, initially intimidated by the modern tech, came over with a curious expression. With astonishing patience, the girls explained how the device worked, using analogies that made perfect sense. "See these numbers here?" Lily pointed. "It's like when you have a fever. If it goes beyond normal, it turns red. Then you know something's wrong." "And these graphs," Daisy continued, sliding her finger across the screen, "are like a car's EKG. Dad always says cars are like people. You have to take care of their hearts." Rick was fascinated by how the girls' simple explanations demystified complex concepts. Where dense technical manuals failed, the girls' kid-friendly analogies succeeded brilliantly. During the installation of the new hydraulic lift, something happened that astonished everyone. The lead technician was having trouble explaining the safety system to the other employees. "Let us explain," Lily offered, pulling Daisy by the hand. The two positioned themselves in front of the group of adults, showing no trace of shyness. Daisy began, "It's like hopscotch. Do you know how to play hopscotch?" The men looked at each other, puzzled by the bizarre comparison. "When you play hopscotch," Lily continued, "there's a certain order to the squares, right? You can't skip from 1 to 3 without going through 2. "The lift is the same," Daisy exclaimed. "There's a sequence of safety steps. If you try to skip any, it won't work. It's to protect everyone." The looks of confusion on the men's faces began to morph into understanding. The girls continued, using everyday examples to explain each part of the equipment. By the end, even the technician was taking notes. "Extraordinary," Rick murmured to Frank. "They have a natural gift for teaching." "It's because they really understand," Frank replied, watching the little teachers with admiration. "They didn't just memorize the procedures, they know why each thing is important." Later that afternoon, when a supplier arrived with the wrong parts, Daisy spotted the error instantly. "These bushings are too big for the new system," she said, picking one up. "They'll put too much stress on the gear and ruin everything in less than a month." Initially skeptical, the supplier checked the technical specifications. Daisy was absolutely right. "How did you know?" he asked, astonished. "Oh, that's easy," she smiled. "It's like when you try on your mom's shoes. No matter how hard you force them, they'll never really fit, and you'll just ruin the shoes." Lily, busy organizing tools nearby, added, "And Dad always says that if you have to force something in mechanics, something's wrong." By the end of that week, Rick realized something special was happening. The garage wasn't just being physically transformed, it was becoming a unique learning center where technical knowledge was transmitted through the eyes and language of childhood. During their visit to the hospital that night, the girls excitedly told Joe about their day of teaching the adults. "But did we explain it right, Dad?" Lily asked, suddenly worried. Joe, with tears in his eyes, held his daughter's hands. "You explained it exactly the way I would, maybe even better." On the way home, Rick reflected on how these two small girls had become natural-born teachers. It wasn't just their technical knowledge that was impressive, it was their ability to translate complex information into simple, relatable concepts. "You know what's coolest about teaching?" Daisy said suddenly, breaking the silence in the car. "Seeing people's faces when they finally get it. It's like a little light turning on." "It's like when Dad teaches us," Lily added. "We're so happy when we understand something that we want everyone else to feel that too." Rick smiled, realizing he was witnessing something rare and precious. There, in that transforming garage, two little teachers were sharing not just technical knowledge, but the pure passion for learning their father had instilled in them. Tomorrow they're installing the new computer, Lily recalled excitedly. We already figured out an easy way to explain the operating system. How? Rick asked, curious. Using dolls, Daisy replied. Each program is like a different doll. You have to know which one is right for each game. Rick laughed, once again amazed by the simple effectiveness of the children's analogies. The future of Joe's garage was in good hands. Small hands, but incredibly capable ones that knew not only how to fix machines, but also how to touch hearts and enlighten minds. Motes of dust swirled in the sunbeams slanting through the garage's newly installed windows. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the girls had decided to tackle the final piece of the old setup, a heavy, dark wood cabinet that had been pushed against the back wall for so long it seemed to have become part of the structure itself. Dad never let us touch this one, Daisy commented, running a hand over the dusty surface. He said it had old, fragile things inside. Lily, a damp rag already in hand, was eager to get started. Now that everything else is new, we have to organize the old stuff too, right? Rick, who was supervising the installation of some shelving on the other side of the garage, watched the girls discreetly. Something about their determination to take on every single task, big or small, always impressed him. The cabinet doors resisted at first, their hinges groaning in protest after years of disuse. When they finally pulled them open, a cloud of dust made them both sneeze in unison. "Look at this!" Lily exclaimed, pointing to a carved wooden box tucked away in the back of a drawer. "It's so pretty." The box was simple, but featured delicate, hand-carved details. Daisy lifted it out carefully, as if handling a precious artifact. When they opened it, the scent of old paper and stored memories drifted out. "They're photographs," Daisy said, her eyes shining with curiosity. The girls sat on the clean garage floor, the box between them, and began to examine each photo with the same focused attention they gave the engine parts their father taught them about. There were black and white pictures, some so old the edges had yellowed and grown brittle, showing people they didn't know and places they had never seen. In some, they could recognize traces of their father in his younger days. "This must be Grandma," Lily whispered, holding up a photo of a woman with a kind face. "Dad has the same eyes as her." Rick, drawn by their hushed discovery, approached silently. His heart nearly stopped when he saw the next photo Daisy held up. "Look at this one, Lily." The photograph showed two teenage boys side by side, smiling in front of an imposing building. They wore matching uniforms, and their faces held a carefree joy that contrasted with the seriousness of the institution behind them. "That's Dad!" Lily exclaimed. "But he looks so young. And who's that boy with him?" Daisy carefully turned the photo over. On the back, in faded ink, it read, "My best friend forever," followed by a date from many years ago. Rick felt his hands begin to tremble. In the photo, his own younger self grinned beside Joe, both of them happy and unaware of how differently their lives would turn out. "Dad never told us he had a best friend," Daisy said with a frown. "And what place is this?" "It looks like a school, but the uniform is different." "And why are they wearing matching uniforms?" Lily studied the photo more closely. "Dad always says he went to public school. He talks about it all the time." The girls continued to speculate, their young voices filled with a mixture of curiosity and surprise. Rick remained silent, lost in a flood of his own memories. He remembered the day that photo was taken. It was Joe's birthday, and they had convinced one of the monitors at St. Jude's Orphanage to snap it as a gift. "Mr. Rick," Lily's voice pulled him back to the present. "Are you okay?" "You got so quiet." He forced a smile, trying to keep his composure. "I'm fine, dear. It's just that old photos can make us travel back in time, you know." The twins nodded, turning their attention back to the box. There were more pictures. Joe at various ages, always in the same place, always in the same uniform. In many of them, the same boy appeared at his side. "Look at this one," Daisy pointed to another photo. "They're fixing a bicycle, just like us." Indeed, the picture showed the two teenagers working together on an old bicycle, tools scattered around them. Rick remembered that day vividly, the day they discovered their shared passion for making things work. That bike belonged to the orphanage and had been broken for months. They had spent weeks secretly repairing it after their classes. "Let's save this," Lily decided, carefully setting the photo aside. "We'll show it to Dad when he's better. He must have a really cool story about it." Rick watched the girls place the chosen photo in a safe spot and carefully put the others back in the box. His heart was heavy with secrets and memories, but he knew the time wasn't right to reveal everything just yet. "Girls," he said gently, "it's getting late. How about we store these memories and go visit your dad at the hospital?" As he helped them put the box back in the cabinet, Rick noticed something they had missed. Lying at the bottom of the drawer was a small metal pendant. He recognized it instantly. It was the matching half to the one he still kept, a symbol of an unbreakable friendship between two orphan boys who dreamed of changing the world. On the way to the hospital, the girls chattered excitedly about their discovery, making plans to ask their father about his mysterious childhood. Rick drove in silence, his mind drifting between the past and the present. "You know," Daisy said suddenly, "it's funny how we think we know everything about the people we love, but there's always more to discover." "It's like when we're fixing a car," Lily agreed, clutching the precious photo in her backpack. "You sometimes have to look really deep to find what needs fixing." Rick smiled at their typical mechanics analogy. They had no idea how much truth their innocent words held. Very soon, the past and present would collide, and a long-held story would finally come to light. When they parked at County General Hospital, the sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Rick watched the girls jump out of the car, the treasured photo safely tucked in Lily's backpack. Time had come full circle. Two children discovering a friendship from the past that, without their knowing, had already shaped their own lives in the present. The hospital room was hushed that afternoon, the silence punctuated only by the rhythmic beep of the monitors and the low hum of the air conditioner. Joe was sitting up in bed, looking much stronger than he had in weeks. The girls entered as they always did, on tiptoe, as if afraid to disturb the quiet. "Dad, we found something," Lily began, her voice trembling slightly with excitement. "We were cleaning that old cabinet in the garage, the one you never let us touch." "Yeah," Daisy added, as Lily carefully pulled the photo from her backpack. Rick stood near the door, his heart pounding so hard he feared the others could hear it. 25 years of secrets and coincidences were about to converge. When Joe took the photo, his hands shook. For a long moment, he just stared at the image, his eyes drinking in every detail as if trying to reclaim a piece of that printed memory. "Dad," Daisy asked softly, "who is the boy with you in the photo?" A single tear traced a path down Joe's cheek. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. This was Rick," he said gently, stroking the photo with his thumb. "My best friend at St. Jude's Orphanage." The twins exchanged looks of astonishment. "Orphanage?" they asked in unison. Joe nodded, a sad smile on his lips. "I never told you that part of my story, did I?" "Yes, I grew up in an orphanage. I lost my parents very young, so I hardly remember them." Lily moved closer to her father while Daisy took his hand. Rick watched silently from his corner, each of Joe's words unleashing a torrent of his own memories. "Rick," Joe continued, his voice trembling, "was more than a friend. He was the brother I never had. We arrived at the orphanage just months apart. He had lost his parents in an accident. I never knew what happened to mine." "How did you become friends?" Lily asked, her eyes shining with curiosity. Joe chuckled softly. "Because of an old bicycle. The orphanage had one, all broken, that nobody could fix. One day, I found Rick trying to fix it by himself. He knew nothing about mechanics, but he was so determined. I offered to help, and we spent weeks working on it after class. Rick closed his eyes, remembering those days, the smell of grease, the clink of tools, the shared sense of triumph when they finally got the bike to work. That's when we discovered our passion for fixing things, Joe went on. We started fixing everything we could find, old radios, broken clocks, anything people threw away. Rick always said nothing was truly broken, it just needed someone who cared enough to fix it. The girls listened, spellbound, seeing their father in an entirely new light. They began to understand why he always stressed the importance of helping others and never giving up just because something seemed difficult. "What happened next?" Daisy whispered. Joe took a deep, shuddering breath. "We got adopted. I was adopted first by a family of mechanics. That's how I really learned the trade. A few months later, Rick was also adopted. We promised to keep in touch, but—" His voice faltered. Rick took an involuntary step forward, feeling the old ache of his friend's words. "Our families moved to different places," Joe continued. "Back then, it wasn't like today with cell phones and the internet. We tried writing letters, but over time, we lost contact. I spent years trying to find him, but I never could." Lily hugged her father tightly. "You must have missed him a lot." "I did." "I still do," Joe admitted, looking at the photo again. "Sometimes life is funny. I was just thinking about him the other day when that kind man stopped to help you." His voice trailed off as his gaze finally, truly, settled on Rick, who stood quietly by the door. It was as if time stood still in that hospital room. Joe looked from the photo in his hands to Rick, then back to the photo again. His eyes widened in dawning, incredulous recognition. Rick finally moved, approaching the bed with slow, deliberate steps. His own hands trembled as he pulled something from his pocket, a small metal pendant, identical to the one Joe still kept among his old memories. "You haven't changed at all, my friend," Rick said, his voice choked with emotion. The silence that followed was broken only by Joe's quiet, racking sobs. The twins watched, mouths agape, as the two halves of a long-separated story clicked into place. "Rick," Joe's voice was barely a whisper. "Is it really you?" The two men embraced, decades of longing and unspoken history dissolving in a wash of tears. Lily and Daisy looked at each other, beginning to grasp the magnitude of what they were witnessing. "So, Mr. Rick," Lily began. "Is the boy from the photo?" Daisy finished, her eyes shining with excitement. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Joe asked, still clinging to his friend's arm as if afraid he might vanish. Rick smiled through his own tears. "I wanted to be sure. I wanted you to recognize me for who I am, not for who I've become. I wanted our friendship to renew itself naturally, the way it did, through your extraordinary daughters." The twins rushed over to hug both men, creating a tangle of arms, tears, and laughter. In that moment, they were no longer a billionaire and a humble mechanic. They were just two boys who, against all odds, had found their way back to each other. "Remember what you used to say?" Rick asked, wiping his eyes. "That nothing is really broken, it just needs someone who cares enough to fix it," they completed in unison, just as they had so many years ago. Lily and Daisy looked on, amazed, as the two old friends began sharing memories, each story revealing more connections, more coincidences that now seemed like pure destiny. The way Rick had stopped on that road, how the girls had shown the same love for mechanics that had once united the two friends. It all made perfect sense now. "I understand why you wanted to help us so much," Daisy said, her quick mind already connecting all the dots. Rick smiled, running a hand through the child's hair. "Fate works in mysterious ways. When I saw you two changing that tire with the same determination your dad had when we fixed that old bike, it was like time had come full circle." "And now?" Lily asked, her green eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Now," Rick replied, turning to his old friend with a grin, We're going to do what we always dreamed of as kids in the orphanage. Build something extraordinary together." Joe clasped his friend's hand as the twins nestled between them. The sterile hospital room, with its white walls and antiseptic smell, had become a sacred space where past and present fused, where separate destinies reconnected, and where a new story was just beginning to unfold. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky with the same brilliant colors that had once filled the dreams of two orphan boys who, so many years ago, had promised never to give up on each other. And now, through the skillful hands of two little mechanics, that promise was finally being fulfilled. Thursday dawned with a different kind of light. Lily and Daisy were up even before their alarm, their small hearts thrumming with excitement. After 3 long weeks, their father was finally coming home. "Everything has to be perfect," Daisy declared, rearranging the tools on the bench in the newly renovated garage for the 3rd time. "Dad always says details make all the difference," Lily agreed, adjusting the big red bow they had tied to the main door. Rick arrived early, finding the girls already buzzing with activity. He smiled, seeing their dedication, so reminiscent of how he and Joe had been at the same age, always taking painstaking care of the few possessions they had at St. Jude's orphanage. "Ready to go pick up your dad?" he asked, sensing the nervous energy of the little ones. The drive to the hospital was quiet, thick with anticipation. In the back seat, the twins held hands, their customary ritual on important occasions. Rick glanced at them in the rearview mirror, his own heart pounding at the thought of the surprise they had all prepared. Joe was dressed and ready when they arrived, sitting on the edge of the hospital bed with a small bag of belongings. He was still thinner than usual, a discreet scar on his forehead, a permanent reminder of the accident, but his eyes shone with the pure joy of finally going home. "My princesses!" he exclaimed, opening his arms to receive their crushing embrace. The doctor gave his final instructions: moderate rest, a gradual return to activities, regular follow-ups. Joe listened intently, but his gaze never left his daughters, as if he were trying to make up for every minute he'd been away from them. "Dad," Lily said on the ride back, barely able to contain her excitement, "we have a surprise." "Yeah, but you have to close your eyes when we get there," Daisy added. Joe smiled, intrigued by the mystery. Rick drove quietly, his heart weighed by the secret of his true identity, but happy to be part of this special moment. Once they arrived at Joe's garage, the girls gently guided their father, covering his eyes with their hands. Rick swung open the garage door. And, "You can look now, Dad." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Joe's sharp, unsteady intake of breath. His eyes swept over every inch of the space, trying to absorb the complete and utter transformation. The walls, once stained with grease and peeling paint, now glowed with bright, cheerful colors, the light blue and yellow so carefully chosen by his daughters. The new floor gleamed under modern lighting, reflecting the shiny new equipment that had replaced the old, worn-out machinery. "Look at the new lift, Dad," Lily exclaimed, pulling him by the hand. "It's automatic and has all these safety systems." And here, Daisy pointed to a neatly organized area. "We set up a classification system for all the tools. Each one has its own spot with color codes." Joe walked as if in a daze, touching each new piece of equipment with a sense of reverence. His eyes grew misty as they reflected the shine of the modern machines, his mind automatically calculating the astronomical cost of it all. When he reached the new top-of-the-line diagnostic computer, his legs nearly buckled. Rick was at his side in an instant, steadying him. That was when the full weight of the situation hit Joe. He turned to Rick, his voice thick with a mixture of gratitude and deep concern. "My friend, this must have cost a fortune. I can't accept all of this. I'll pay you back every cent, even if it takes years. I'll work double, triple if I have to." "But Dad," Lily interrupted, running to hug him, "you haven't even seen the best part yet." "Yeah," Daisy joined the hug. "We arranged it all, just like you always dreamed." But Joe's gaze remained on Rick, his face a complex mask of gratitude and distress. "I don't want to owe so much money, even to a friend as good as you. I have my pride. I need—" Rick placed a hand on his friend's shoulder, gently cutting him off. In his mind, he wrestled with the moment he would finally reveal his true identity, but he sensed it still wasn't the right time. "Joe," he said softly, "remember our promise at the orphanage? That one day we'd have our own shop, where we'd fix not just machines, but a bit of the world as well?" Joe nodded, the memory of those shared dreams on quiet nights at the orphanage flooding back. Think of this not as a debt, but as the fulfillment of that dream. A dream shared by two boys who promised never to give up on each other. The twins looked on in silence, proud of their father's sense of honor and moved by the deep friendship unfolding before them. For girls who had been raised on lessons of honesty and hard work, seeing their father worry about repaying every penny, even after receiving so much help, was a lesson they would never forget. "Now," Rick said, breaking the emotional tension, "how about your master teachers show you how each piece of new equipment works?" The girls' eyes lit up at the suggestion. They soon had their father moving from one corner of the garage to the other, explaining every detail with the enthusiasm and deep knowledge they had gained during the renovation. Joe listened carefully, his heart swelling with pride as he watched how much his little girls had grown in those few weeks. His worry about the debt still lingered in the back of his mind, but for now it was eclipsed by the sheer joy of seeing his daughters so happy and competent. The rest of the afternoon passed in a dreamlike haze. Neighbors dropped by to welcome Joe home, each bringing something to celebrate. The garage, now spacious and inviting, easily accommodated everyone. As the sun began to set and the last visitors said their goodbyes, Joe found a moment alone with Rick. "I don't know how to thank you," he began. "Then don't," Rick said with a grin. "Just promise you'll use all of this to keep being the extraordinary man who raised those two incredible girls." Joe nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Deep down, he sensed there was more to this generosity, something his childhood friend was still not ready to reveal. Meanwhile, Lily and Daisy, exhausted but happy, had fallen asleep on the new sofa in the waiting area, still clutching the instruction manuals for the equipment they had spent the afternoon explaining. The garage, now silent, seemed to breathe with new life. The organized tools, the modern equipment, the brightly painted walls all spoke of a fresh start, of dreams realized, of a friendship that time had failed to erase. Night settled softly over the town, bringing with it the quiet peace that follows dusk. In the modest living room of Joe's little blue house, the group gathered after dinner, sharing stories and laughter. The twins loved hearing about their father and Rick's adventures at St. Jude's orphanage, each story revealing a new facet of the two friends. And there was a cook, Mama Betty, Rick recalled, his eyes shining with the memory, who always saved an extra piece of cake for us whenever we fixed something in the kitchen. "It was the best cake in the world," Joe chuckled, even if it was just old bread soaked in milk and topped with sugar. Lily and Daisy listened, enraptured, snuggled on the worn-out couch between the two men. The atmosphere was cozy, lit by the warm glow of a single lamp and warmed further by the shared memories. That was when Lily, observing Rick with the keen curiosity of a child, asked the question that would change everything. "Mr. Rick, why do you always wear such simple clothes if you have such a nice car?" The silence that followed was heavy with expectation. Rick looked at Joe, seeing in his friend's eyes a quiet understanding, as if Joe had already guessed, had known on some level for quite some time. Rick took a deep breath. The moment he had both dreaded and anticipated had finally arrived. "You see, Lily," he began softly, "sometimes life takes us down roads we never imagined. When I left the orphanage, I was adopted by a very wealthy family." The twins sat up straighter, their eyes wide with interest. "They gave me every opportunity possible. I went to the best schools, studied engineering in college, and, well, I ended up becoming a businessman. Actually, I own one of the largest automobile companies in the country." "You're rich?" Daisy asked, her voice a near whisper. Rick offered a gentle smile. "Yes, Daisy. I'm what people call a billionaire." Lily jumped off the couch, her mouth agape. "A billionaire? Like with a B?" But then Daisy's brow furrowed as her quick mind connected the dots. "Why did you need our help with the flat tire? Why not just call someone?" Rick leaned forward, his eyes meeting the girls. "Because a long time ago, I learned that money, as useful as it is, isn't the most important thing in life. I grew up in an orphanage where I learned the value of true friendship and genuine kindness. That's why I like to travel alone and dress simply. I want to meet people for who they really are, not for what they might want from me." Joe, who had been watching silently, smiled. "I already knew," he said softly. "Not about the money. But I knew you were still you, the same Rick I grew up with. The way you treat people, how much you care, that hasn't changed one bit." "Why didn't you tell us before?" Lily asked, a slight hint of hurt in her voice. Rick reached out, gently touching the girl's cheek. "Because I wanted you to know me for who I am, not what I have. I wanted our friendship to grow naturally, just like it did in the orphanage with your dad. Money can buy a lot of things. It can buy a new garage, modern equipment. But it can't buy the genuine smile of two little mechanics who stopped on the road to help a stranger," he finished, his voice shaky with emotion. Daisy, ever the analyst, asked, "Is that why you wanted to help us so much? Because of the money?" "No, dear," Rick answered, shaking his head. "I wanted to help because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. The purity of doing something just because it's right, without expecting anything in return. You gave me back my faith in people." Joe stood up and walked over to the window. The full moon illuminated the yard, where the newly refurbished garage stood out like a beacon of hope. "So, all this time," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "while I worried about how to pay you back." Rick joined him by the window. "There's no debt, Joe. What I did was just returning something you taught me a long time ago, that true friendship has no price." The girls looked on, absorbing the significance of the moment. Lily, the more emotional one, had tears in her eyes. "But now," Daisy said suddenly, "will you still visit us, even though you're a billionaire?" Rick laughed, a sound filled with relief and joy. "More than ever. In fact, I have some plans to discuss with you, ideas to expand the shop, and maybe start a training program for young mechanics." "Like in our childhood dream," Joe added, smiling. The night stretched on, yet no one seemed to notice. Stories continued to unfold, now with an added layer of depth. Rick spoke of his travels around the world, always seeking ways to help people as he and Joe once had. Joe talked about expanding the garage, creating opportunities for young people. The twins, though impressed by the revelation, quickly went back to treating Rick the same as always. For them, he was still the friend who helped them when they needed it most, the man who brought the light back into their father's eyes. As they finally went to bed, Lily paused at the bedroom door and turned. "Mr. Rick?" "Yes, dear. Rich or poor, you're still the best tire-changing apprentice we've ever had." The laughter that followed was pure, genuine, and free of secrets or pretenses. Under that starry sky, two families, one formed by blood, another by destiny, truly became one. "Your dad needs some routine tests," Rick explained to the girls one morning. "How about we spend a special day together?" The twins' eyes lit up at the suggestion, while a team of workers discreetly prepared to renovate the house. "First," he announced with a smile, "we'll go to the largest toy store you've ever seen." Lily and Daisy looked at each other, astonished. They rarely went to toy stores, as money was always needed for more urgent things. "We can really go in?" Daisy asked timidly. "Of course, and you can pick whatever you want." The store was a paradise of color and fun. Although they loved mechanics, they were still kids, and their eyes sparkled at all the choices. Lily fell in love with a racing track set with miniature cars, while Daisy discovered a science kit full of fascinating experiments. "Look, Lily," Daisy exclaimed, "it even has a real microscope." To Rick's surprise, besides the toys they picked for themselves, the girls asked to buy a teddy bear for their dad, to keep him company while he's still recovering, Lily explained. After the toy store, Rick took them to an amusement park. The day was perfect, and the girls' laughter filled the air as they tried every ride. From the top of the Ferris wheel, they looked out over the city, making plans for the future. On the carousel, they allowed themselves to be the children they were, free from worries. "I've never been on a roller coaster before," Daisy confessed, still panting after the ride. "Me neither," Lily chimed in, her eyes glowing with excitement. "It was the best day of our lives." The rest of the day was a magical blur of fun and games. When they finally returned home, it was already evening. Rick stopped the car a short distance from the house. "Close your eyes," he said, wearing a mysterious smile. The girls complied, clutching each other's hands as Rick guided them. The smell of fresh paint and new wood hinted that something had changed. "You can open them?" Their shrieks of surprise echoed through the transformed living room. The once simple space now radiated warmth and comfort. The peeling walls were replaced by soft, cozy tones. A new, spacious sofa stood where the old, battered one used to be. Light curtains danced in the breeze, wafting through newly installed windows. But it was the corner of the room that brought tears to the girls' eyes. Occupying an entire wall was a library. Shelves of light wood held books of all kinds, technical manuals on mechanics, science books, and a complete collection of fairy tales. Are these all ours?" Daisy asked, her voice shaking with emotion. "Every one," Rick confirmed, "including that special section right there." On one of the shelves, several bright, brand-new notebooks stood out. "For you to write your own stories and projects," Rick explained. Lily had already dashed into the kitchen, tugging Daisy along by the hand. The transformation there was just as impressive. New, light-colored cabinets and modern appliances replaced the old, rattling refrigerator and chipped counters. In the center stood a sturdy wooden table with 4 comfortable chairs in place of the wobbly old one. "Look, Daisy," Lily exclaimed, opening one of the drawers. "There are brand-new utensils and plates that actually match." But the real surprise awaited in the twins' bedroom. When they opened the door, they froze in wide-eyed wonder. The once cramped space had been completely reimagined. 2 new beds, each with bedspreads in the girls' favorite colors, blue for Daisy, green for Lily, stood on opposite sides of the room. In the middle, a spacious desk with 2 comfortable chairs provided the perfect study area. "Check it out," Rick pointed to the wall above the desk. A large mural was split down the middle. On one side, space for Lily to hang her futuristic car drawings. On the other, a corkboard where Daisy could organize her technical notes. The girls dashed around, discovering every detail. Neatly arranged drawers with brand-new school supplies, a roomy wardrobe stocked with carefully folded new clothes, and a small shelf near each bed holding books chosen especially for each of them. The bathroom, once barely functional, now gleamed with modern safe fixtures. "Wow, there's even a little stool so we can reach the sink," Daisy noted, ever practical. Emotions spilled over from the girls, who couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry. Every detail had been arranged with such care, so thoughtfully matched to their needs and tastes. "But what about Dad?" Lily asked suddenly, worried. "Is he going to like it?" As if in response to her question, they heard Joe's voice from the living room. "Why do I smell fresh paint? What the—" His words trailed off as he entered, leaning on his cane. Still recovering, Joe took in the changes with wide eyes. The girls ran to him, gently leading him around to see each improvement. "Dad, come see our room. Check out the kitchen, Dad. We even have a dishwasher. And the library, look at all these books." Moving slowly, Joe touched each new surface as if he couldn't believe it was real. When he reached his own bedroom, he found that it, too, had been completely redone, with a comfortable bed to help his recovery and a small office area where he could organize garage paperwork. "Rick," he began, his voice cracking, but Rick raised his hand, stopping him gently. "Don't start talking about debts," he said with a smile. "This isn't about money, Joe. It's about giving these princesses and their dad the home they deserve." Exhausted but overjoyed, the twins had settled on the new living room sofa, leafing through some of the books in the library. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the house. Mrs. Johnson, who had helped with the finishing touches, had left the coffee maker ready for its first use. "See, Joe," Rick said, glancing at his daughters, "I always wanted to give them something better." "But you did," Rick interrupted. "You gave them love, an upbringing, strong values. I just helped with the material part." That night, for the first time in a long while, the family slept in comfortable beds in welcoming rooms, in a home that finally reflected on the outside all the love that had always existed on the inside. The last words before drifting off came from Lily, her voice already heavy with sleep. "Dad, now we have a house that looks like a princess's. But you know what's even better?" "What's that, sweetheart?" "We're still the same family as before, only now we have more books to read." Joe smiled in the darkness, silent tears of gratitude dampening his new pillow. Outside, the moon lit up the renovated house where one extraordinary family was beginning a new chapter in their story. Time has a peculiar way of changing things. 2 years had passed since the renovation of the garage and the house, and the differences were evident in every detail. On the walls of the girls' bedroom, the childish car sketches had been replaced by impressive technical drawings brimming with annotations and precise calculations. Now 9 years old, Lily was hunched over her desk, focused on her newest invention. The robotics kit Rick had given her on her last birthday had awakened an even deeper passion for engineering. Her now long braids swung as she made tiny adjustments to a small solar-powered robot. "Daisy, come see," she called, excited. "I managed to make it move using sunlight." Daisy, who was busy organizing her drawing materials on the other side of the room, came over curiously. Her artistic talents had flourished in surprising ways over the past couple of years, especially after Rick set up a professional easel in her corner of the room. "That's amazing," Daisy exclaimed, watching the robot move under the window's light. "Can you imagine if we built a car that worked like this?" Lily's eyes lit up at the idea. Within seconds, both girls were seated together, Lily sketching out a technical diagram, while Daisy added color and design details that made the project even more special. Joe stood at the doorway, a proud smile on his face. Joe's garage continued to thrive, now brimming with modern equipment and loyal customers, but his greatest joy came from watching his daughters develop their own dreams. "Dad," Lily called, noticing him, "come check out our new project. It's a solar-powered car with an accident prevention system." "And look at the aerodynamic design I made," Daisy chimed in, showing off her colorful sketches. "It'll help save energy." Joe approached, amazed at the complexity of their work. Lily had inherited his technical understanding, but she'd taken it to a whole new level by incorporating technologies he was only just beginning to learn about. Daisy, on the other hand, had an artistic vision that turned machines into true works of art. Rick, who now visited the family almost every day, walked in carrying more books for the ever-expanding library. "Got some new additions," he announced, catalogs from the top universities in the country, and books on the latest innovations in clean energy. The twins rushed over to check out the new materials. In recent months, they'd become obsessed with the idea of higher education, doing endless research on the best schools for engineering and design. "Look, Lily," Daisy exclaimed, flipping through one of the catalogs. "This university has a combined program for mechanical engineering and automotive design. We could study together?" "And they've got cutting-edge labs," Lily said, her eyes sparkling at the photos. "Think how much we could learn." Rick and Joe exchanged knowing smiles. Secretly, Rick had already started an education fund for the girls, ensuring no financial barrier would ever stop them from pursuing their dreams. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Rick found the twins still awake, whispering excitedly about their future plans. "And when we have our own company," Lily was saying, "we'll build cars that never break. And they'll be the most beautiful cars in the world," Daisy added. "Safe, eco-friendly, and gorgeous." Rick stood in the doorway, listening. "Have you already thought of a name for this company?" The girls sat up on their beds, enthusiastic. "We were thinking something like Innovative Sisters," Daisy said, "or maybe Wheels of the Future." "But it has to be something that reminds us of Dad," Lily pointed out. "After all, he's the one who taught us everything in the beginning." Rick settled between their beds. "You know," he began softly, "when I was your age, I also dreamed of changing the world through mechanics. But you two, you're something special. You don't just have the knowledge, you have your hearts in the right place." "What do you mean?" Daisy asked, curious. "You're not just interested in building cool cars or making money. You want to do something that helps people, that makes the world better. That's rare, and it's precious." Lily clutched her little solar robot. "It's because we learned from Dad and from you that the most important thing is to help others." "Speaking of helping," Daisy added, "we also want to start a mechanic school for kids. Teach other girls who like fixing things too." Rick felt a surge of pride and emotion. Throughout his years as a businessman, he had met many brilliant people, but few had such pure motivations as these two little dreamers. Behind the scenes, he was already working his connections in the business world. He was setting up a special mentorship program at his company, thinking about the day when the twins would be ready to join the industry. He had also initiated talks with top universities, paving the way for them when the time came. For now, though, he simply watched with joy as they constructed grandiose dreams, Lily with her innovative ideas, Daisy with her revolutionary designs, both sharing the same vision of a better future. Before leaving the room, Rick paused to admire the mural they had created. It was full of magazine clippings on technology, sketches of futuristic cars, and at the center, an old photograph. Two smiling boys in front of a fixed-up bicycle, a testament to how simple dreams can grow into something truly extraordinary. "Good night, little inventors," he whispered, switching off the light. "Good night, Uncle Rick," they replied in unison, already half asleep, their dreams poised to create new wonders by morning. In the hallway, Rick ran into Joe, who was also watching the girls sleep. "They're really going to make it, aren't they?" Joe asked, his voice a blend of pride and concern. Rick smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his friend's shoulder. "I have no doubt, and we'll be here to watch every step of their story come true." Spring arrived in all its glory, bringing fresh colors and new life to a neighborhood that no longer resembled the one from 2 years before. The once neglected streets now boasted blooming trees and well-tended sidewalks. What used to be an abandoned lot had been transformed into a small community park where children played under the watchful eyes of neighbors. But the most significant change wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, a feeling of hope, of possibilities, of dreams that once seemed impossible but now felt within reach. At the center of it all, like a shining beacon, stood the little blue house of the mechanics. What had once been a humble home was now a gathering place for kids and teens in the neighborhood. In the inviting living room, the library Rick had set up was always filled with eager young readers, hungry for knowledge. On that particular afternoon, Lily and Daisy were hosting a study club. Around the large dining table, other neighborhood children gathered to learn and dream together. Lily explained physics concepts using engine parts as examples, while Daisy transformed complex formulas into colorful diagrams everyone could understand. "Look here," Lily said, holding up a gear. "See, this is how force transfers from one piece to another, like when you form a bucket brigade passing water from person to person. Each person is a gear." Rick and Joe observed this scene from the porch, where they had developed the habit of sharing an afternoon coffee. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the floral scent from the garden the twins so lovingly tended. Who would have thought, Joe mused, his eyes glowing with pride, that day on the road would change everything. Rick smiled, remembering the moment he saw two tiny figures approach his stranded car. "You know, Joe, I spent years building a corporate empire, but I've never felt as wealthy as I did on the day your daughters stopped to help me without expecting anything in return." Inside the house, laughter and lively chatter continued. Daisy showed off her latest eco-friendly car designs, explaining how aerodynamics could help conserve energy. Her illustrations, increasingly sophisticated, had grown beyond mere childhood doodles into genuinely viable concepts that blended beauty and functionality. Mr. Miller from the grocery store passed by on the sidewalk, giving them a wave. His store, renovated thanks to Rick's neighborhood revitalization program, had become a thriving little market, but he never forgot to save the best fruit for the twins, keeping alive the tradition he started back in those tougher days. "Those girls have a special gift," Rick observed, watching how the other kids hung on Lily and Daisy's every word. "It's not just about technical skills. They have a way of inspiring others to dream." Joe nodded. Joe's garage, now a hub of mechanical excellence, frequently welcomed young people curious to learn the trade, but it was Lily and Daisy who truly captivated them, turning complex ideas into accessible, fun lessons. "They haven't lost their essence," Joe said, his voice thick with emotion. "With all the comfort and opportunities you've given them, they're still the same at heart." "Right then," Lily exclaimed from inside, "it doesn't matter if you messed up. What matters is trying again. Remember what Dad always says? In mechanics, just like in life, nothing is hopeless unless we give up." The afternoon wore on, and one by one, the kids headed home, each leaving with not only new knowledge, but bigger dreams than they had arrived with. The last to leave were two sisters who had recently moved into the neighborhood. "Thanks for the lesson," the older one said timidly. "I never thought girls could be mechanics, too." Daisy smiled, exchanging a knowing glance with her sister. "Not only can they definitely should. Come back tomorrow, and we'll teach you how to change a tire." Rick felt his heart squeeze at the familiarity of that moment. Fate, in its infinite wisdom, seemed to have completed a perfect circle. Now it was his two girls reaching out to help others, planting the same seeds of kindness that had once transformed their own lives. Evening began to fall, bringing with it the gentle peace that comes when everything is exactly as it should be. The new street lights, another of Rick's improvements, switched on automatically, casting a warm, welcoming glow. Lily and Daisy joined the adults on the porch, each carrying notebooks filled with project ideas, their faces shining with that unique blend of childlike innocence and beyond their years' wisdom. "Uncle Rick," Lily began, "do you think someday we'll manage to make all these dreams come true?" Rick glanced at Joe, then at the girls, feeling a deep surge of emotion at the sheer love and hope contained on that small porch. "My dears," he said, "you're already doing it. Every time you help someone, every time you inspire a new dream, it's like that very first time you changed my tire by the side of the road. We never know how a small act of kindness can change the whole world." The girls smiled, settling themselves between their dad and Rick. Above them, the first stars of the evening began to appear, like small beacons of hope, lighting the way for all the dreams yet to come. "You know what's the best part?" Daisy asked softly. "We're still ourselves, but now we can help more people." "And that," Rick added, "is the real miracle. It's not about how much money we have or how many things we can buy. It's about how we use what we have to make a difference in other people's lives." Joe pulled his daughters close, filled with an immense gratitude for everything life had given them. A thriving garage, a comfortable home, the chance for a better education. All wonderful, but the true treasure was right here, in this simple moment of togetherness, and in the kindness they continued to share. The neighborhood would continue to transform, the dreams would keep growing, and new stories would be written. But at the heart of it all would remain that extraordinary family, proving that destiny sometimes uses the simplest tools, like a tire iron in the hands of two little mechanics, to build the most remarkable stories of all.